shore, and they marched across the broad expanse of the earth and surrounded the camp of the saints and the beloved city. Fire came down from heaven, consumed them, and then finally the devil, who had deceived them, was finally thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur, into which the beast and the false prophet had already been thrown 1,000 years beforehand, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. And then I saw the great white throne, and the one seated in it, and heaven and earth fled from his presence. That's the end of the world. The world is finished now. Earth is gone, heaven is gone, the sky's been rolled up, earth has been thrown away, and there was no place found for them. Literally, there was no place found. They were gone. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and this is the resurrection of the dead. So there's the scheme. There's the scheme. That's all we really need to go into from Revelations 1 to Revelations 11. I think that's all we really need to go into. And the matter here is really the concept of this Gog and Magog thing. Now, Faznab, help me out here. Where on earth do Christians get the idea that Gog and Magog is going to come before the millennial reign? Where do they get this idea from? Isn't it clear that it comes after the millennial reign?
This is an interesting addition, I think, in the prophetic industry. There's an author, let's look him up, Joel Rosenberg. And now he's a Messianic Jewish believer. He used to be a ghostwriter for a very famous American conservative talk show host. And he brought this, these four corners in a literal sense. So it's framed, I think, what's his book called? Joel Rosenberg's...
I've got something here on his website. Joel Rosenberg.
Yeah. Let's look at some of his. Let's look at some of his books. Yeah, you can see he's a best-selling author. So he's been very influential in. I'm
not sure. He's got fiction and non-fiction. So what should we look at? Non-fiction, I suppose.
Well, everything. I think everything he writes is almost very much fiction. So you can see Libya. That's put. So.
Where was that? I missed that.
His first book is. You can see some of these books. So he brings in this really, it is the political, all the enemies surrounding Israel, and then Israel somehow squeaking by God, which Israel has. I mean, we've had evidence of this in its last 70 years of history, Six-Day War, Yom Kippur War, a very similar scenario. So the real book, one of his early books from the 90s is the one I'm referring to. So it's kind of informed a lot of this prophetic.
These are the fiction.
Yeah.
Joel's fact-based fiction. Fact-based
fiction. Yeah, you can see them all. The Ezekiel option. There it is, right there. That's the book.
I've heard about this. The Ezekiel option.
Oh,
yeah. So people are always talking about this book. What is this book? I mean, this is quite a famous name. I've heard so many people saying, "Have you read the Ezekiel option?" Okay, all right. So this is the guy who's responsible for it.
Yes.
So what is the Ezekiel option? And is this where the idea of the Gog Magog war coming before the millennial reign comes from? Is it his fault?
Yes.
Okay, so it's his fault. All right, so let's just throw him out.
I mean,
sorry, he's rubbish.
I wouldn't say. No, wait a second. I wouldn't say it's his fault. Even as I was listening to Izzy today.
So he's been misguided then.
I mean, he's following a certain messianic infused dispensation. Yeah, you can see he was a ghostwriter for Rush Limbaugh, so that's why he's Tim LaHaye. Okay, so Tim LaHaye is he's your modern day Darby. He's the one who wrote the Left Behind series, along with Dallas, who does The Chosen's father, and so you have to understand these are the most read of the prophetic industry in a broad-based sense, but within a dispensational theological framework. Now, dispensationalism is important to understand as it is a premillennial linear literal interpretive mode, but it comes out of what is called historic premillennialism, and there's a lot. And the earliest historical premillennialists were the Chiliasts. In the early first 3 centuries, they were known as the Chiliasts. Many of the early church fathers had written about them, and it was a majority report until Augustine.
But I think we're getting off. I think with this, I mean, premillennial. I'm not going to issue with. Is it where they were saying that Gog and Magog comes before the millennium? Is that what they were saying? This is the question I wanted to pin down. Really, this is where it's come in through. Because it seems pretty obvious. Following this, Revelations 20, the Gog and Magog is absolutely certainly at the end of the millennium rule.
Well, that's why I'm saying why did they even make such a move? Because, like I say, they're a literal linear type of interpretation of this eschatological framework in a dispensational sense, and so therefore, why did they put it before Why do they not deal with it in the text as it's written here in Revelation 20? That's my question as well.
So dispensationalism, I'll just remind, because I think not everybody is familiar with these phrases. I certainly wasn't. I don't know if there are any Jews or Muslims who are watching. Dispensationalism. Okay, let's have a look. Dispensationalism, and here's a picture which I think really sort of sums it up in a quick and neat way to understand. It's on. I'm going to show it now. It's on Wikipedia. So it basically says that the Bible chapters Genesis 1 to 3 could be, depending on what kind of dispensational scheme you are believing in, they have different names. So there's a 7 and 8 step dispensational scheme, a 4-step dispensational scheme, a 3-step minimalist scheme, and there's a covenant theology scheme. And in a few of those, at least 2 of those, you've got Genesis 1 to 3 as its own dispensation. Then a couple of more of those, the 4-step and the 3-step, say that Genesis all the way to Exodus is the patriarchal dispensation for the 4-step. And the 3-step says, no, that's Genesis all the way to the end of Exodus 20. That's the law section. And then you've got some agreement that all of them come to agreement that then you have the church age rapture, the grace or church or ecclesial or grace, depending on whether you're 7, 8 step or 4-step or 3-step or covenant theology, you all agree that there's this church age rapture. And then Revelations 20, which is what we're talking about now, is the millennial kingdom or the Zionic kingdom or just the kingdom, depending on which one of those steps you're in. So there is a kind of a transition between church age rapture and Revelation. And the thing which I kind of wanted to pin down and think about and talk about is, when is this transition between the grace or ecclesial grace period and the millennium kingdom or Zionic era, this swap over? Okay, when is this? And then you've got only the 7 or 8 step group really believe in Revelation 20 to 22 being the eternal or final stage. Now, the eternal or final stage, obviously referring to the defeat of Gog and Magog, which begins in chapter 20, verse 11. The final stage begins. The judgment, the resurrection of the dead, the final judgment. Death and Hades are thrown into the fire. Satan is thrown into the fire, and it's all over. So there are these. This is what dispensationalism is. And it's quite useful to know that there are several different kinds of dispensationalism. So basically, I think an easy way of understanding this would be, if you're outside the church tradition, is to understand the stages in the scheme of things, in the greater scheme of things. Okay, so it's called dispensationalism, is referring to how many stages there are in the greater scheme of things.
Well, one other very caustic part of it is that they interpret, again, like we are always addressing, this interpretation that the law was how, following the law and full adherence to the law was how man was saved in these previous dispensations. You see the Mosaic law, and then this hard split between grace or the church, which causes this problem we're trying to address with antinomianism. Right. So there's a historical aberration of this which totally misunderstands Judaism.
It's interesting. The covenant theology talks about the grace period is from Genesis 3. Essentially, that's the fall from grace all the way up until the church age rapture. And I would say that is kind of true from a Judaic point of view. That's the chen sort of concept. And so I would say they got the point. There is no distinction between law and grace. It's the same thing.
This is the thing, because having studied earlier in my Bible college was dispensational, but I did go to a covenant theological seminary. So that's Presbyterianism, basically, Reformed theology. And but the problem there is replacement theology. So it's totally over spiritualized Israel. So, but nevertheless, because of that training that I've had, that's why we have this certain resonance between us. I believe we're talking somewhat more where I'm able to understand it. Where most Americans they'll come into covenant theology later in life because they'll see this dispensational schemes are really found wanting, and then. But I've always been more, I've been able to, in my earlier years, to always kind of just leave that premillennial question in a historic sense, the 2 horns, the aberration of Islam and Christianity, in Romanism, Orthodox included. So I always look at maybe the Reformation, I've always looked at as a corrective, but because they followed the political solution, therefore I've always been more. And they're the ones that have found the least acceptance within certain thought structures would be the Anabaptist Christian, who align closer to what we always talk about as the Baptist successionism or the trail of blood. So
I think, if I may, I think so. I mean, I always talk about the trail of blood and the Baptist successionism. I say this is the real lineage we should be studying when we're talking about the Christian faith. And this Reformation is a bit of a red herring, because all it really means is that there was a victory